What if I told you the greatest city on earth is falling, not in a blaze of glory, but in eerie, creeping silence? Look around. Skyscrapers that once scraped the sky in triumph now cast shadows over empty streets. Neon signs flicker over shopping malls where no one shops. And beneath those towers, beneath all that glass and steel, thousands huddle on cold concrete, not just homeless, but forgotten. But here's the twist. It's not just poverty tearing the city apart. No, something darker looms. After the US bombed Iran's nuclear sites, New York has transformed overnight. Tension crackles in the air. Armed patrols roam the streets. Cameras track every move. The city of dreams? Now a city of fear. Fear of job loss, rent hikes, and now fear of what comes next. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of a city collapsing under its own weight, and from the shockwaves of a distant war now felt in every corner. There was a time when New York's shopping malls were cathedrals of consumerism, glittering temples where crowds gathered not just to buy, but to feel live, to belong, to be part of that endless city rhythm. You could walk those marble corridors and feel the hum of ambition in the air. Today, that hum is gone. What's left is the echo of footsteps that no one hears anymore. The polished floors are buried under layers of dust. Cracked glass and faded signage whisper of better days. Where once stood holiday displays and eager shoppers, now stand the forgotten. People seeking any corner of shelter, hiding not just from the cold, but from the shame of being unseen. These malls, these former beating hearts of the city's economy, have become hollowed-out husks, ghost houses where dreams came to die. And here's the cruel twist. It isn't just changing shopping habits or the rise of e-commerce that emptied these places. The shockwave of global unrest, sparked by distant wars and volatile decisions, has sent energy costs through the roof. Maintaining these massive structures, lighting them, heating them, securing them, became an expense no owner could shoulder. The bombings in Iran didn't just rattle the Middle East, they set off a chain reaction that made even New York's giants crumble faster. The malls fell quiet, and into that quiet crept the city's most desperate souls. Homelessness in New York isn't just a crisis, it's a quiet catastrophe unfolding in plain sight. More than 108,000 men, women, and children have nowhere to call home tonight. That number? It's not just shocking, it's a question of how a city that once promised opportunity for all now lets over 100,000 human beings slip through the cracks. The math is brutal. Over 1/3 of New Yorkers are trapped, paying more than half of what they earn just to keep a roof overhead. Hard work? It's no longer a guarantee. Stagnant wages collide with skyrocketing rents, and the so-called affordable apartments? They're vanishing like mist at dawn. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, the global stage sends its tremors right into our backyards. That distant war, those airstrikes on Iran, sent oil prices soaring. Suddenly, the cost of everything, from heating your apartment to buying a bag of groceries, climbed higher and higher. Families who were already walking a tightrope found the rope snapping beneath them. People who scraped by last month are on the street this month. In a city famed for resilience, it now takes just one unexpected bill, one job loss, one rent hike, and the abyss swallows you whole.
It starts slowly. A few empty offices here, a handful of shuttered shops there. But like cracks spreading across glass, the damage grows, silent, unstoppable. New York's downtown, once a fortress of commerce, now glows faintly at night. Its towers lit only by security lights that feel more like tombstones than beacons. Behind those empty windows lie the ghosts of jobs lost, the accountant who once worked late to buy his first home, the cafe owner who knew every customer's name, the delivery driver who dreamed of saving for college. Each vacant office means property taxes shrink. The city, desperate to fill budget holes, raises fees, raises taxes, and pushes more people, more businesses out. Residents pack up, small stores vanish, the streets lose their rhythm, and what's left is a hollow cityscape where even hard work can't save you. They call it the doom loop. But this is no theory, this is happening now. And as that loop wasn't vicious enough, global tremors have tightened the noose. The Middle East crisis, those bombings in Iran, fractured supply chains that once fed New York's heartbeat, prices for groceries, gas, basic goods, they've soared. The corner deli struggles to stock its shelves. The truck driver can't afford his route. Retail workers are let go as shops cut costs to survive. And so the spiral quickens, dragging more of New York's working class toward that abyss where homelessness waits. Once, being part of New York's middle class meant standing on solid ground, a modest apartment, a reliable job, a future you could plan for. But today, even those who've done everything right, worked double shifts, paid taxes, kept hope alive, are watching that ground crack beneath their feet. The teachers, nurses, shop clerks, maintenance crews, the people who make a city run, now teeter on the edge. If even they can't hold on, tell me, who can? And in this chaos, while families pack their belongings into battered cars, while workers sleep in shelters, or worse, in their vehicles, a quieter, more calculated force moves in. The city's abandoned buildings, those empty offices and malls, they don't stay empty for long, not in the eyes of real estate giants. While ordinary people lose their homes, the wealthy quietly scoop up properties at rock-bottom prices. They wait, patient, knowing that one day the market will rise again. And with every block they claim, the dream of home ownership slips further from the hands of working New Yorkers. The city's soul isn't just vanishing with its jobs. It's being bought, piece by piece, by those who see crisis not as a tragedy, but as a bargain. Imagine this: New York, the crown jewel of finance, the city that built empires and inspired dreams across the globe, now finds itself trapped, not by a lack of resources, but by its own red tape. The city announced bold plans: transform empty offices, those glass and steel tombs of a pre-pandemic world, into homes, real homes. Plans like 25 Water Street, promising over 1,300 apartments, were meant to be the start of something hopeful. But hope, in New York, keeps hitting the same walls. Outdated laws, architectural codes written for another century, endless layers of approval where city and state point fingers instead of joining hands. Renovation costs spiral, negotiations stall, and as they argue over ceiling heights and parking minimums, the buildings stay empty. And outside, the sidewalks fill with people who have nowhere else to go. But here's the part that should haunt us. The tragedy is no longer just about jobs lost or apartments left vacant. It's about a city losing its soul. A city where trust is fraying between neighbor to neighbor, between citizen and government, where a teacher, a nurse, a delivery driver can give everything they have, play by every rule, and still end up sleeping in a car. New York, a city where property values soar beyond the GDP of small nations, wears a grim new crown, the homelessness capital of America. Over 108,000 stories of lost stability, of families once safe now sheltering in parks, of seniors crouching beneath overpasses, of workers hiding their struggle in the shadows. And the lights of the skyline still blaze every night, but at street level, darkness thickens. And as this darkness spreads, the choices we make, or fail to make, define who we are. When cities treat blankets as litter,
when tents are cleared in the name of urban order, what we sweep away isn't just fabric or plastic. We sweep away our last fragments of shared humanity. Ask yourself, if a city this rich, this proud, this storied can't protect its most vulnerable, what exactly is left to be proud of? In a New York that once celebrated the middle class, where working hard meant a steady apartment, a few vacations, the belief that you'd be okay if you tried, that class now balances on a knife's edge. They're not poor enough for assistance, not rich enough to outrun the costs. They're the nurses, the janitors, the school secretaries who pay their taxes, who show up, and who quietly wonder, how did it come to this? Picture the woman who worked decades in an office, now sleeping in her SUV because $4,000 rent outpaced her paycheck. She's not an exception. She's the warning. In this city where rent consumes 50%, even 70% of income, it takes just one bad break, a medical bill, a pink slip, a car that won't start, and the bottom falls out. And as the middle class begins to collapse, so does the fabric of the city. Schools lose their students, hospitals lose their staff, neighborhoods lose their neighbors. What's left is not community, but a fragile sense of waiting for the next price hike, the next eviction, the next crack to appear in what was once solid ground. New York isn't starving for space. Look around and you'll see them. Empty townhouses with curtains drawn for years, office towers with no tenants, malls that once roared with life, now echoing like cathedrals of the forgotten. The city is haunted, not by ghosts of people, but by ghosts of possibilities wasted.
More than 108,000 people, children, seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, sleep in shelters, in parks, in cars. Meanwhile, 88,000 apartments sit empty, enough to house an entire small city. And those buildings, they don't stay empty because they must. They stay empty because the system chooses it. Investors bide their time, waiting for prices to rise. Regulations meant for luxury high-rises block any attempt to repurpose these spaces for those in need. Want to turn a vacant office into housing? Good luck. You'll need floor-to-ceiling windows for natural light, parking that no one will use, soundproofing fit for a penthouse. The city made promises, 20,000 units from old offices, a fresh start. But promises don't shelter people. Most of these plans are stuck, trapped in endless approvals, debates over words like compliant, and fears of upsetting real estate markets. On one side, families sleep beneath scaffolds in the rain. On the other, buildings stand empty, year after year. This isn't about money. New York has resources. What it lacks is the will to put people first. Policies are human-made, and humans can change them. Lawmakers could act. They could loosen regulations, try emergency conversions, hand the keys to community groups ready to help. But every delay, every excuse, every legal argument puts another barrier between the city's wealth of space and its wealth of need. There was a time when New York's soul was its people, the patchwork of immigrants, workers, dreamers who turned blocks into neighborhoods and neighborhoods into a city like no other. The smell of fresh bread in Brooklyn, kids' laughter spilling from stoops in Queens, the low hum of a corner bodega's radio in the Bronx. Together, these pieces made New York feel alive. But today, that hum is gone. The city hasn't been struck by earthquake or fire. It's crumbling quietly from the inside. Poverty creeps in where businesses close their doors. Fear replaces trust. The rich retreat to high-rises. The rest pull down their blinds, lock their doors, and hope the next crisis passes them by. As the gap widens between those with shelter and those without, the city's invisible threads snap. Parents no longer let kids walk to school alone. Elderly neighbors stop chatting from their windows. One left, the other too afraid to come out after dark. The places where community lived, the churches, rec centers, food pantries,
are stretched thin or shuttered altogether. Community becomes just another word on a plaque, not something felt on the street. I think of a man, once a teacher, now living in his car. Every morning, he parks near his old school, tutors kids, pretends everything's fine. No one asks where he sleeps. Maybe no one wants to know. Maybe everyone's too busy trying to keep their own lives afloat. And that's the fracture at the heart of it all. When we stop seeing each other, stop helping each other, the distance between us grows. Each canceled project, each delay, builds an invisible wall. Each person we treat as a nuisance to clear, not a neighbor to help, cracks the glass of this fragile city. Until one day, the whole thing shatters. The people who once held this city together, the teachers, the nurses, the clerks, the janitors, are no longer part of its foundation. They're being pushed to the edges, invisible until their absence leaves a hole no shiny skyscraper can fill. When they lose their place, so does the city lose its heart. And what is a city without that heartbeat? Look at those shopping malls, those monuments to consumption that once buzzed with life. Now they stand as cold, hollow shells, concrete blocks stripped of meaning. At night, their shadows shelter the very people the city turned its back on.